I feel like I lived a life that was not my own for a good portion of my life. And from the outside looking in, I was the epitome of health. But that was actually when my health really reached its worst point and I started to deal with a lot of these chronic health issues. I was dealing with depression. And I remember one day so vividly, like laying in bed and literally saying the words over and over again as I was crying, like, this isn't real. I really believe that health is not just the absence of disease, but it's the presence of optimal feeling and function. So functional medicine will look at optimal reference ranges. What do we need to do to get you to feel and function at your very best? Most people have a lot of gut imbalances. So we run microbiome tests, which is going to be a stool test. And this looks at good bacteria, probiotics, bacterial overgrowth, pathogens, leaky gut. And 9 out of 10 times I see most women and men, but a lot of women come back with dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the good and the bad bacteria. I had no idea that because of my health issues, intertwined with walking away from a 5.5-year relationship and just restarting my life all over again, that I was about to enter into an incredible journey of healing that would ultimately lead to the most incredible relationship that I could ever have with myself.
Well, welcome back, everybody. You are in for a treat today. I have Rachel Shear with me. She is a certified functional medicine practitioner with a degree in nutrition science and dietetics from Baylor University. She's also the CEO and founder of Rachel Shear Nutrition, a leading functional medicine nutrition practice in the United States. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Kristy, thank you for having me on. I'm excited about our conversation, especially with our conversation we've been already having off air. So I know we're going to get into some good stuff here today.
We should have hit record.
I almost thought, I'm like, are we recording? Like, we should just keep going because this is really good. But we'll bring it back for sure.
Rachel, I just have to say that you truly are, you are so beautiful physically, but you are even more beautiful on the inside. And I've been watching you on social media and your stories, and I'm all about integrity. And, you see a lot of people on stage and you see a lot of people on social media, and then you see the way that they actually live their life. And outside of everything else, just the way that you show up and that congruency makes me a huge fan. I have such respect for you.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I actually got chills as you were saying that, because that is more so a new chapter that I've been in my life for the last few years. I'll be the first person to be very vulnerable and say, I feel like I lived a life that was not my own for a good portion of my life. And this led to a lot of my own health issues. This led to burnout in my life. This led to a lot of, mental health issues and hustling and striving and trying to be what I thought that I needed to be in order to, right? Why we all do this in the first place, but get the love and desire that we ultimately want. That's really what it all comes back to. So that is very, very meaningful to me, because when you step out in authenticity, when you are truly fully authentically yourself, and like where I'm operating from right now in my life is like what you see is all of me, right? I'm the same person that you get on a podcast, as you get on stage, as you'd see on social media, which you were just saying off air. Like, you see photos and videos of me, like I'm talking on stage, and then in the next story, like I'm spinning around like a ballerina in my garage and I'm dancing and I'm playing. And I used to hide so much of that with myself. I used to think like, okay, don't be too much. Don't like bring the weird, the goofy part of you, which is so much my personality. Like, I'm a weirdo. I'm a goofball. I'm playful. I'm like a little 8-year-old. I always say, like, I'm an old soul, but my spirit is like an 8-year-old little kid, like very, very playful. And the more that I really just brought that part of me out, brought my authenticity out to the scene, even as scary as it was, the more in alignment I started to live in my life, and just everything started to fall into place. So thank you for noticing that.
My pleasure. Thank you for putting it out there. I had seen a quote one time, and I thought, if I ever got a tattoo, perhaps this would be it. What it said was, to be the person that you're not is to waste the person that you are. Because I too need that reminder to just, to live full out no matter who's watching, because I don't think that we can really find our people can't find us if we're not being ourselves, right? I don't know if you've ever been in
And
a
you can't,
situation. Yeah.
yeah, you can't really ever fully live in your purpose too. I actually shared on my stories
Mm.
earlier this week, which was coming from me journaling in my morning routine. And, so many of us were like, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? But your purpose can only ever be tied to your authentic self, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about that,
Yeah.
if you're trying to be anybody other than yourself, of how you think you should show up, and these masks that we wear consciously, subconsciously, sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing it, but anytime we're not truly fully all of ourselves, and we're suppressing parts of ourselves, we're hiding out of fear of rejection, of what other people will think, you can never ever possibly be in your purpose, because it's only tied to all of you. And I remember
Yeah.
as I was journaling on that, I was like, that's so powerful, right? And that's just such a beautiful thing to think about, because the more healing we do, the more connected we become with our purpose.
I think I'm going to borrow that. That was so beautifully said, and I never thought about it that way. But it's so right, so true. How was Rachel Shear Nutrition birthed? How did you decide to do this?
Yeah. Everything that I do now today, all of my work, right, that revolves around healing and functional medicine, business coaching, mastermind, even my certification and the things that I talk about, they've all been just pieces of my own journey,
Mhm.
and things that now I love to talk about because I've lived through them with my own experience, and I've just taken those things, turn them outward. And honestly, I talk about them because first and foremost, it helps me. I think there's a lot of people online that are like, here, what do people want from you? Right. And talk about things that other people want. And I'll be the first to say, everything I put out there is first for me. And I know that may sound so backwards, right?
Yeah.
Because what you hear is the opposite, is like, what do people want? What's going to get the most engagement and likes, right? Especially when so many, at least entrepreneurial businesses, are really based on, what other people want. And when I released a lot of that and I just started to put out there what was helping me the most, that's when things really started to shift. But to dive into that a bit further, my story, I struggled a lot with my own health issues in my early 20s. And I grew up as an athlete. I was a gymnast, I was a dancer. So fitness for me has always been a huge part of my life. After I graduated from college from Baylor in nutrition and dietetics, and I was already working in clinical and nutrition, I got
Mm.
into bodybuilding and I was competing in competitions, and I was really good at it. I was shredded, six pack abs. I was the cover on these magazines, Men's Health, bodybuilding.com. And from the outside looking in, I was the epitome of health. But that was actually when my health really reached its worst point, and I started to deal with a lot of these chronic health issues. I was dealing with depression, I was
Mm.
dealing with anxiety, I was dealing with hormonal imbalances, I was dealing with thyroid issues, and I was dealing with chronic gut issues where I'd literally look 6 months pregnant at the end of every single day because of how bloated I was. And this ultimately led me to the route of going to Western medicine because, right, something's off in your body. You don't feel well. That's what we're taught to do. And right, as we should go to the doctor, make sure there's not anything major going on. But little did I know this was going to put me down this entire journey of going from doctor to doctor, from specialist to specialist, right? I go to the endocrinologist for my hormones and my thyroid. I go to the gastroenterologist. I do the scans, the MRI, the CT, colonoscopy, endoscopy. I go to the Mayo Clinic. I go to all these different physicians. And before I know it, I'm on 5+ medications. I'm on a
Mm.
medication for my depression. I'm on prescription laxatives because I couldn't even use the restroom anymore because of a lot of my gut issues. I'm on synthetic thyroid medication. I was already on birth control, so that's playing a bit of a role in the only reason I actually even had a menstrual cycle at all, which wasn't a real menstrual cycle at the time. So I'm on all these medications, and my health is just getting worse and worse and worse. And I become very fed up with the system, right? Because a lot of these issues, right, they were able to rule out there wasn't anything major going on. But then I was just given a diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, right?
Mm.
And it's like, okay, your gut is irritable. That's what irritable bowel syndrome stands for. It's like, well, no, duh. Thank you for telling me that, right? But then you're given medication. if you go to the doctor and they do a list of different symptoms for depression, and if you fit a certain criteria, they say you have major depressive disorder, right? Based off of symptom clusters, and you're put on a medication. And it was actually shortly after this, as I continued to get worse and worse. And I remember even many days just lying in my bed, living in survival mode, like in so much pain. I even remember one day, like I remember like so vividly, like laying in bed and literally saying the words over and over again as I was crying, like, this isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. I couldn't believe that this was my life. And this is what was really happening in my health. Like, I was miserable. And it was shortly after that, I was even sent to a colorectal surgeon, and they told me what they could do to fix a lot of my gut issues. And the chronic constipation that I had was to cut out my entire large intestine to sew my small intestine to the rectum. And that was really, that final solution for these gut issues. And, I tell people this story, and very similar to your action, like shaking your head, like, wow, like it is, wow, like I can't believe that was offered. I remember at that point in my life being like, cool, all right, when can we schedule the surgery? How soon can we get this done? And because I was at that point in my life where I was that low and I was that desperate, right? I just wanted to get better. And which is why I can empathize with people so much who are really in a dark place in their life, who are really struggling, whether that's emotionally struggling, whether that's physically struggling, to be at that point because you're desperate. You'll do whatever you can to get out of it. And I think sometimes, yes, medication can help people get out of that place, which is why I'm not against medication. But what I am for is getting to the true root cause. And for whatever reason, in that moment, I had just like a thought, and I was like, okay, just let me give it like a month longer. Like, let me give it a little bit longer. I have to push out the surgery anyway to get it scheduled. And this just lit a fire inside of me. And I started becoming obsessed with learning all about gut health and the microbiome and the bacteria in our gut and how they're connected to all of these systems in our body, between our hormones, our thyroid, our adrenals, to our brain. I started to learn more about functional medicine and a root cause approach, which was like groundbreaking at the time. Like, what? Root cause? Like, that's what I've been trying to figure out, is like, there's actually like a medicine where people will help you do this, because I only knew about Western medicine with what I grew up with. And I started to do different testing my microbiome. I found out I had a ton of imbalances in my microbiome. I had something called SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And I really started to put a lot of the puzzle pieces together of what was really going on with my health. Right. And, even at the time, I remember thinking like, oh, I figured out the root cause. I have SIBO. And I started to do all of these herbal protocols, which we do antibiotics, and we do different kind of herbs that will eradicate bacteria overgrowth and take supplements to support the gut. And I'm doing all these things. And yeah, it did actually help a bit, but I kept relapsing over and over. But it did give me that little bit of hope, because I was like, okay, like I'm making improvement. Like, this is a good place where, maybe I could skip a couple of days where I wasn't miserable or something like that. But ultimately, this led me down a path of really, really deep healing work, right? And something that I actually say and I talk about on my social media and different talks that I give is the whole person must heal for the gut to function optimally. I had no idea that because of my health issues, intertwined with walking away from a 5.5-year relationship and just restarting my life all over again, that I was about to enter into an incredible journey of healing that would ultimately lead to the most incredible relationship that I could ever have with myself.
So beautiful. And so through that, you decided to start a business and teach others, right?
That part. Yes. So diving into, functional medicine and learning all about the gut, I really became an expert in gut health, the microbiome, looking at the body as an interconnected system, right? And from a physical level, what was really happening for me is I was under a ton of metabolic stress. I was at a very low percent body fat. I had a lot of emotional stress, which was negatively impacting my gut, because the gut completely shuts down when the body's under a lot of stress. Cortisol is chronically elevated, which cortisol is catabolic. It leads to the gut lining breaking down. When the gut is not digesting, this can allow for bacteria to overgrow. On top of that, when the body's operating in a highly stressed state, this is going to downregulate thyroid production, which plays a big role in metabolic function and energy levels. It's going to downregulate hormone production. So we see a decrease in testosterone, estrogen, progesterone levels. We're going to see with all of the hormones, the thyroid, the whole neuroendocrine system, the gut being imbalanced is a byproduct of this. We're going to see mental health and the brain impacted, not to mention that I had already had a good amount of emotional stress that was stemming from unrooted really trauma that I wasn't aware of at that time in my life that was creating this this hustling for my worthiness that was manifesting in my physical health. And so it was all of these things that ultimately, in discovering this and stepping into holistic healing and healing my body through these different methods, led me to want to get certified in functional medicine. With my background in dietetics, I started my own practice as a one-woman show in 2017. And then in 2019, I really started to grow it and grow a team, bring on some other coaches. And now it's this incredible mission today where we've served over 5,000 people and taking a root cause approach. And it all stemmed from my own healing journey that I was in.
It's all by design, right? Like if you didn't go through that, then you wouldn't be able to help all of these amazing people that are just as desperate, if not more desperate than you were. So there's a lot of people out there that want help and they're exhausted and they're tired. And when they hear things like whole body approach and emotional and trauma, and they go, oh my gosh, I don't want to go there, right? I just want help. Can you speak to that person a little bit who you can help, but they're like, I don't want to open that door and I don't want to take all that time. I'm sure you have people that reach out to you that at some point they're like, oh man, how long is this going to take, Rach? Like, let's just fix me.
I think having that awareness is a really beautiful place to start, right? Because a lot of people are in the place in their life where they are struggling physically or they are struggling emotionally. And for anyone who's listening and you're like, yeah, that's me, just having that awareness is a really powerful place to be at. For most people, they don't want to dive in and do the quote unquote work and lean into the healing or even maybe functional medicine until things get to a pretty bad place in their life where they're really struggling with their health or they're really struggling with depression and their emotions and just their quality of life is not where they want it to be, and I wish it didn't have to get to that point. So I think sometimes though, it can also just be hearing it, like listening to a podcast like this. And, you already have that awareness of, okay, I'm not where I want to be. And I really need to make some shifts in my life. And that can be the catalyst for you to want to create the change that you desire in your life. There are different pathways in which you can take and lean into. And I'm not the type of person to say like, this is the path that everybody must take, right? For some people, it may be leaning into doing something like functional medicine and getting proper lab testing done, right? In functional medicine, we look at more optimal reference ranges instead of standard reference ranges, which 95% of the population actually fits into the standard reference ranges, which change over time based off of population averages, which are really just meant to be ranges that ensure that you're not diseased. Does not mean that if you fall in that range that you are healthy and feeling your best. And I really believe that health is not just the absence of disease, but it's the presence of optimal feeling and function. So functional medicine will look at optimal reference ranges. What do we need to do to get you to feel and function at your very best? And it'll look at the body as a connected system, right? How is your gut influencing your hormones, which means what is the root cause of actually what's leading to your health issues, if that's what you're struggling with, whether, for ladies, it's PMS, hormone issues, skin issues, gut issues, bloating. A lot of women struggle with gut issues. Actually, more women than men struggle with gut issues. And part of that has to do with the cyclic nature of females' hormones, right? Women are not little men. And I think so often we're treated as if we're little men, which men's hormones cycle on a 24-hour basis. If you think about work schedules, right? And you coming from the corporate world, it all follows the male cycle. Well, women, we're different. We are incredible. We follow actually the moon. Like we follow the lunar patterns. So, right, our hormones cycle on a monthly basis. Super interesting. Most medical studies have been done either on menopausal women or men, because they actually looked at women with cyclic hormones and said, this is too complicated to get consistent data. So we're not even going to run studies on them, which is just mind blowing for me to think about, because most of like medications and things that they test were done on studies with men. So this is why also women can be that much more symptomatic when it comes to medications, because they didn't even test it and how that responds specifically to women.
That just blew my mind. That just like, I'm sorry, men, but these men have to be running these tests. They have to be these protocols. You just said something though. The person has to be ready for coaching and to do your program. And I say the same thing, we can't really get anywhere unless you're ready. And sometimes there's things that have to happen in life and you get real tired and you're sick of being sick and now you're ready for help. But, for the listeners out there, I'd like to encourage you to think about it a different way, because this whole movie could end for us tomorrow, and we have one shot at this life. And so, yeah, maybe you don't have a disease that's set in, but like, how good do you feel? And why can't we feel great every single day? Right? Like if we have 10 years left, 5 years left, 1 year left, why do we have to go through it and suffer without a proper diagnosis? Or, oh, we don't have heart disease. Yeah, but you feel like crap every single day. Why can't we be optimized and feel amazing every single day? That's what I hear. And from going on my own journey, there's no reason to have to suffer.
I think health is one of the most underrated life hacks truly out there, because often we just think about health when we're sick, or we think about health when it comes to having a six pack or looking good naked. And it's so much more than that. I truly think your health is the foundation for creating the relationships, the life that you ultimately want for yourself. Because if you're chronically tired all the time, if you are struggling, whether with gut issues, you're not going to be able to operate the way you want to every single day. Like there was no way that I was thinking about, starting a business, chasing my dreams, doing any of those things when my health was absent, right? None of that is possible when we don't have our health. And it's like that cliche saying, like health is wealth. But I truly think it's like the number one manifestation tool, like we have to have in place in order to create the life that we ultimately want for ourselves.
So true. It's the foundation. And there's so many examples from my own life, but recently here, I was walking my little dog, and I'll be 44 this year. And I don't know if this is what happens at 44, but I twisted my ankle on absolutely nothing, and a flat sidewalk. And so, of course that now has led to my hips being off and now my back. And so, but you know what? It has my full attention. It has my full attention because I hurt and then I can't get in the gym. And I know it'll be over soon because I'm seeking the help to get, chiropractor, massage, body work, etc. But I can't get to the 10 levels above and beyond me. And like you said, stepping into your purpose and what we're truly meant to do, if that's all that we're focused on is this little tiny area of feeling tired or my back hurts or something needs to be fixed. And even like, I remember, so when I was in corporate and I went and did this cleanse in Fiji, and I came back and I realized that I'm supposed to poop every day. Because that wasn't happening. And, you realize I'm like, oh, that's like, and you kind of hear like, again, in a man's world, like, oh, men go every day, and women, it's like every 3 to 4 days. And it just kind of became this, somehow it was normalcy. And then I realized like, well, this isn't normal. And, I watch my little dog when she goes to the bathroom and she feels so good. She's peeling out, she's like doing her own little dance. And I started to get colonics because I was like
Mhm.
chronically constipated, high stress, everything's like this, including my poop,
Yeah.
like nothing was letting down. And I remember my colon hydrotherapist, she goes, tell me about your morning routine. I'm like, well, I wake up and I check my email and she's like, no, 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 no,
Mm.
no, no, no. Hang on a second. If you drink coffee, I need you to sit there and you have to let down. And it was $1 million advice for me at the time
Mhm.
because I had to be conscious about pooping and drinking
Mhm.
water and letting the stress be lower so that I could do that. And there's just so many things that have come just from that one thing.
Yeah, it all goes back to the nervous system, and that's
Yeah.
actually a topic that I love to dive into because
Yeah.
a lot of my own healing revolved around healing my nervous system, right? And when we have trauma that we haven't addressed, it manifests in nervous system dysregulation. It's like a fancy word for saying anxiety, but nervous system dysregulation, it can actually be two different things, right? I think for most people, especially in today's culture, this hustle culture that we live in. And I say all of this, and I'm also in it. So,
Yeah.
like, listen to that. But I also share my experience of living on the extreme side and being able to find the balance and an ebb and flow between the two, where I can maintain my energy, I can maintain a lot of my femininity, my vibrancy,
Yeah.
all of that, while I still go after my dreams. And I think that's really the fear for so many high achievers and entrepreneurs that they have is they're like, oh no, this helps me. This
Yeah.
helps me so much. And I want to be the first person to say, hey, there's a better way. And I
Yeah.
promise you, you're not going to have to give up your dreams. You're not going to have to sacrifice what it is that you want, but you get to operate from a completely different place. And it's such a game changer. We'll probably dive into that in a bit, but coming back to the nervous system piece, right? Nervous system dysregulation, most of us are operating in this upregulated nervous system place where the body's stuck living in a sympathetic dominant state. What is this? It's a fight or flight state. This is a chronic stress state. And as I shared before, like the gut completely shuts down, the motility comes to a halt. This is what led to a lot of my gut issues, but that's right.
Mhm.
Exactly what was happening to you immediately when you woke up in the morning. And, I know for myself early on, I'd like swan dive into the coffee pot. Like we do all of these things. We check our phones right when we wake up, we check our emails, and immediately like cortisol goes into a chronically elevated place, right? The
Mm.
body's not in this relaxed state where digestion can actually occur. And
Yeah.
women are a bit more sensitive, right? In the second half of a female cycle, when progesterone is at its highest, also
Mm.
motility slows down even a bit further.
Mm.
Progesterone can actually contribute to a bit of constipation for
Nice.
some women. So, this is why, for a lot of women in the first half of their cycle, especially when the hormones are at the lowest, and more closely mimicking a man's hormones, a lot of women actually feel a lot better. They can build muscle easier. They can do fasting a lot more easy to. And then as they enter into that second half of their cycle and progesterone and estrogen are now at their highest, they're like, okay, I feel a bit more water retention. I feel a bit more bloated. Constipation's picking up for me. And this is actually
Mm.
where women need even that much more protein because progesterone actually is a bit more catabolic. So it's actually a bit harder for a woman to build muscle in the second half. Knowing all of this can be incredibly powerful because we can make certain modifications to our nutrition and our routine. But what I really hear from you is, you had to really make some shifts to allow your body to be in more of that parasympathetic state in the morning time. And that's a big part of like my own morning routine. Like I had to make some shifts in that too, right? For my ladies who just want to wake up and get shit done, or mamas out there too who are like immediately wake up, like tending to the kids first thing in the morning. Like it's so crucial to have that time with yourself. For me, it's I have to have at least an hour. I know not everybody has that privilege to do so. I didn't for a lot of part of my life, but I've made certain decisions in my life to allow for that to be something that I give myself in the morning time. It wasn't something that happened overnight. So I hear all the time, I was like, well, that must be nice. And it's like, well, yeah, I created that for myself because it's
Right.
important for me, right? And we all have the ability to do so. But I have to have that time in the morning, right? To just really sit with myself, to to slow my breathing, to meditate, to read, to journal. And it's been such a game changer for me in my own life. And I know for a lot of the clients that we work with, making some of these subtle shifts to bring the nervous system down can be a radical difference in someone's health in and of itself.
I think a lot of us high achievers think nervous system regulation. You think like, oh, that broke person who's sitting in a field meditating, right, all day. And they're like, that sounds pretty good to me, actually. But I think a lot of high achievers go like, well, they're not getting anything done, or they can't do this, or they can't do that. Like, it's almost like it's one or another. But you've trained your body to be able to go sympathetic, parasympathetic. Can you talk a little bit about, because you're a little bit of everything. You're a boss babe. You're on stages. You're running a business. You're lifting. Like, if you aren't watching on YouTube, and watch on YouTube or go to her Instagram page and see how this woman is built. Watch how she lifts weights. She is lifting heavy shit, picking it up, putting it down. So I know you're going there. You can't do that and not have that fire inside of you, but yet you come out of that. So how do you transition in those moments to go in and then come back out?
I love this question, because another definition of health, I say, is health is the ability to go back and forth, meaning health is the ability to choose, right?
Yes.
Meaning I can go into more of a sympathetic state, which is like an action state. It's like get shit done. And then I can come out of it and I can lean into the parasympathetic state, right? It's like the masculine versus the feminine. And both are good. We need both. Where this becomes problematic is when we get stuck in one or the other. A lot of us are operating in the sympathetic state, but operating 100% in the parasympathetic state, that's not good either. We call that depression, right? We call that burnout, which is essentially when the body's been operating so long in a sympathetic state, it's saying, hey, I need you to slow down. So what am I going to do? I'm going to purposely make you really tired. I'm going to suppress your immune system, so you're probably getting sick a lot. And I'm going to put you in this parasympathetic state so that we can actually heal and recharge. Our body's incredibly smart. We try to outsmart it all the time.
And people wonder why they're getting sick. Right?
Yeah. Your body's actually doing what it's doing based off of how you're treating it in a lot of ways. Or the opposite, right? Operating 24/7 in that sympathetic state. We call that anxiety, But I know for myself, where I used to operate a lot more in that sympathetic state, I noticed a lot of the negative consequences in my life between burnout and my health issues. And it's like interesting, because over time you're like, okay, the manifestations of these things are just kind of taking different forms, but the root cause, right? And that's what I'm about, is always the same, right?
Yeah.
And that's why doing a lot of the deeper healing work is so important. It's the root cause for me wasn't my gut issues. It was what led to that. And it was my own inner wounds. And like I said, that worthiness piece, and it always ties back to that. It's not unique to me. I think that's a lot of us, because, when we're younger, what is our core source of survival? It is connection. Like for a little kid, connection is literally how we survive. You take that away from our parents, that means death to a kid. So as a young kid, we will do whatever we can do to create connection. So if you have a parent who maybe only gives you praise and love when you are achieving, what does that teach a young kid? Okay, I need to change myself and I need to continue to achieve so that I can get the connection from my parents. And then this continues on later on in life. This could be small, subtle things where, a kid, being his or her normal, goofy self, and then is made fun of and is laughed at as a young kid. And they lost connection and love from other people. So what did they begin to believe of? Oh, don't be you. Don't be you, because if you're you, if you bring that part out, then you're not going to be loved. So what happens over time is we begin to put on these masks and these masks and these masks as we get over. And that's really that authenticity piece that I was really talking about, because healing at the core is really, I return back to self. It's removing
Yeah.
all of these masks that we wear, and it's, revealing who we've always been. It's not we're becoming anybody else. It's
Yeah.
actually far opposite, which a lot of
Yeah.
self-help stuff is like, who do you need to become? And I hear it and I understand the heart in that, and there's nothing wrong with it. I totally get it. But ultimately, I believe that it's like, what do I need to get rid of? And these masks that I've been trying to portray myself as and be in order to have this type of love. And the more we do that, the more we come back to wholeness, which isn't really a destination. It's a place that we operate from, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
You may need to help me because I went off on a tangent there.
Oh, no, no,
The
no.
question,
But
oh,
you know
you
what?
asked me
It's
how
fine.
I go back and forth. Okay.
You said so many beautiful things.
Uh,
And one thing that I want to say, and then I'll bring us back, is I believe that there's a lot of people that feel, and I do this in my coaching program where, I'm helping them with the tools and resources to become unstoppable. But you're not broken and life is not stopping. So guess what? We're still setting goals. We're still going to be accountable. And as I'm giving them these tools and resources, life still goes on. We don't have to stop. And it's great to go away to a retreat. It's great to take a trip. I love that. I love hosting that.
mhm.
But you don't have to stop everything in order to do, some of the deep healing that you've done. And sometimes it's just hearing a story, hearing your example. I remember when I went to Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins,
Mm,
he said, "Whose love did you crave the most as a child, your mom's or your dad's?" And I said, "My dad's,"
yeah.
in my head. And then the next question was, who did your child mind think you needed to become in order to receive more of your father's
Mm,
love or that
mhm,
person's love? And immediately I flashed to a moment in time that I had never thought about before. And I flashed to this time where my little child brain watched my mom meet my dad at the back door after he had worked all day. And she's unloading everything that she did. And she's being a woman and she's being vulnerable and she's seeking attention and she's seeking connection. But I didn't get any of that. The only thing my child brain picked up was he blew right by her as she's
mhm,
downloading all these things. And I just need to be quiet and put my head down and not talk about this stuff and my feelings and just keep on going. Right.
It's that choice.
So, pretty interesting to see that went into a male dominated cutthroat environment, right, for
Yeah,
15 years and was very much in my masculine energy. And
yeah.
so it was that moment, Rachel, that I was like, oh, whoa, 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 and I don't like, okay, that's great. And I know how to do that. That's not who I want to be. That's not where I want to. And was that even true? Right. Like it was my child brain interpretation. I don't know if that's true, if it's not true, but it's my truth because I believed it and I lived it. So I guess what I'm saying is, for people that are listening, sometimes it's in an instant you figure something out and now you have a big piece to the puzzle. And it's not like you have to stop and you have to open this door and you have to go to therapy, which I love therapy and I believe in all of this stuff, but you can get some breakthroughs and start to get a peek into what's going and get some movement in the right direction off of a couple conversations.
Your story is very, very powerful. Personally, I think therapy, it can be a bit more surface level and like really, really digging deep in which getting to where a lot of these things stem from, which I believe too, like the brain will give it to you if it's something that you need to know, but we also don't
Yeah.
need to like go and search for answers and understand everything ultimately from our childhood in order to be able to heal. And I think that's what a
Yes.
lot of people believe is we have to understand all of those things. Like you had a moment where
Yeah.
your brain decided to give that to you because at that moment of time, that was something that you needed to further your healing, which is incredibly powerful. I've had very, very similar experiences. And one thing I wanted to comment on that you said, it was like my truth right in that moment. And that's exactly what we do
Yeah.
as a young kid is things happen in our life and we make it mean something about us, right? So
Mhm.
something happens and we say, oh, this is happening around me because of me, because that's the only way that a child's brain can operate from. So mom's out gone and she's not at home. That's because mom doesn't want to be with me because I'm not good, right? That's literally how a little kid's brain works. Is that the truth? No. Like that's not the truth at all. Mom's out gone because mom has her own shit and she's partying and she's drinking, she's doing all of these things, but it actually had nothing to do with you, right? So we as a young kid create all of these meanings about
Yeah.
ourselves. they're not actually the truth. And that's why it's so powerful when you begin this journey, because you begin to realize that truth is, no, I made this mean something about me.
Yeah.
So I've been operating from this belief my entire life that hasn't been true. I created this belief. And when we carry these beliefs, we start to search and be a detective for other things in our life to prove that belief to be true, right? And this
Mhm.
is really manifestation at the core. People talk a lot
Yeah.
about manifestation and thinking about all of these things that they want to happen there in their life, but we're always manifesting. We're manifesting
Mhm.
24/7 throughout the day. I do not believe you need to go sit and meditate to manifest. That's not actually how it works. Like everything you have in your life right now, you've manifested based off of
Yeah.
your beliefs, based off of the ways in which you relate to yourself, based off of therefore your habits, your energy that you bring out to the world. And that is thus creating all of your relationships and your entire
Mhm.
reality, which is why, in order to create a different reality, what do we have to do? We have to really change our beliefs. We have to change the
Mhm.
views that we have about ourselves, and not just on a affirmation level. We have to really actually change those beliefs that we have. And so we can manifest things that we want in our life, but thinking about the things that you don't want to happen, you're actually manifesting those just as much in your
Yep.
life, because the brain really doesn't know the difference. It deletes the not, and whatever you think about and you focus on, right, becomes your reality that we begin to create from.
I love this. I knew that we were just destined to have a
Yeah.
conversation and be walking through this world, this life's journey together. So just to wrap up the parasympathetic, sympathetic, because I know that you bounce back and forth and I do too.
Yes, I'd love to answer that.
Do you use any breathing techniques to bounce back and forth between the two, or do you schedule your day where you're like, okay, you know what, I'm going into boss babe mode between this time and this time, but then I'm going to bring it down? Like, can you give any advice of what people can do? Because I think a lot of times people, and this used to be me, where I'm amped up, and then it's
Yeah.
like, okay, it's time to go to sleep. Well, shit, now I got to have a glass of wine because I'm so amped up, possibly caffeine, but probably more than anything, it's just that I'm wound tighter than a drum. And so now I have to have a glass of wine to bring myself down to even get sleep, which is not good sleep
Mm.
anyway. So, what would be a better way for somebody who's fearful of like putting down
Yeah.
that wiredness that they believe is the result of the success or the fuel for their success? How
Yeah.
could they bring that down every day?
I like to gamify things, and I'm always playing games with myself.
Yeah.
But something I try to challenge myself with is, how can I bring more of the being into the doing?
Mm.
Right. And what I mean by that is, think about things that you do on the day to day basis, or maybe it's not even on the day to day basis, but I like to think of like work where I'm being very creative, or when I'm very, very present in a conversation with somebody. You almost lose the track of time. Like you're just
Yeah.
fully present. But I don't know about you, but I actually get energy from a lot of those things. Like when I am very present, when I'm having a conversation with a friend, right? And like conversations like these where I'm in it. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not trying to get to the
Mhm.
end. That's where you said wrap it up. I'm like, shoot, how long has it been? Creating for me is such a beautiful way for me to create energy from it. I can literally go from a place of where I'm feeling tired and depleted, and then I lean into doing things like writing or journaling, or this is why you see me dancing in my garage, right? These are all different forms of expression and art, and I'm always trying to sprinkle in things like that throughout my day, right? That's like bringing the feminine into a lot of the masculine kind of get shit done kind of stuff that I'm
Yeah.
doing. And it also makes it a lot more fun. I try to play in it all, right? I think as
Yeah.
adults, we forget how to play, right? So it's like, can you have fun in everything that you're doing every single day? And I know that sounds silly to do, but can you bring more of that kid-like energy, into your work, in between some of the things that you're doing in work? Put on the music between calls. And I think it's a beautiful way to actually take away some of like the pressure and the stress that we feel on a day-to-day basis. So that's helped me exponentially, because I think sometimes it's not that we're burnt out on doing too much, but we're burnt out on doing too little of the things that really feed our soul and make us feel alive. And I bet you if we were to all create a list of what are the things that we do that deplete our energy, it's all like the task type things. And we were to make a list of the things that like really give us energy, right? And maybe this is like dance, maybe this is, for some people, exercise, although sometimes if we get very task focused on like, I'm just trying to get through it, maybe not. And this could be writing. What are those types of expression based activities where you are so present in it? Because I can guarantee you, when you incorporate more of that into your life, you're going to actually be giving yourself deposits of energy throughout the day. And this is such a powerful tool for everybody listening, because I think so often we're looking at ways of like, okay, how can I like bring myself down and regulate, which that's also important too, right? So yes, I love breath work. I incorporate that also throughout my days. So I've had 3 podcasts today and I have work stuff. And so what do I do though? In between these calls, I give myself breaks. I turn on music. I was in my garage. I'm like a little kid. I'm like sitting on a yoga mat, like eating my lunch on the ground outside in the sun, listening to music. You know, I'm bringing those things in, and I'm bringing my nervous system down. I'm paying attention to my breath, and I'm doing some deeper breaths where it is like, okay, let me actually like take some deep breaths in, 8 breaths in and 8 breaths out, and just really ground myself. So I'd say it's those kind of things. And I think this is where a lot of people who end up in like that burnout place, they feel the need to like, all right, I need to take days off. I need to like really change my life. And sometimes we do need that. But I think ultimately the more we can incorporate these kind of things, creative things that give us energy, you know, sprinkle in throughout the day things that can really help ground you, you know. And that was for me. I used to think how can I knock as much things out as possible, right? Get things done, which is a very masculine way to operate. And I think that's why in this, as I started to sprinkle these things done, I started to do everything with that much more ease and grace and play. And guess what that meant? I started to actually accomplish more and enjoy it in the process. And it's like, what is this? And it's a completely different place to operate from, because now you're actually enjoying what you're doing instead of just trying to hustle your way through it. So then the last piece that I'll add into this, you know, kind of coming back to the healing part of this is, you know, when we have the achievement so attached to our identity, that is also going to create a lot of the nervous system upregulation. So for me, not saying that I ever don't feel that. I think this is why healing, it's a journey. I don't think we get to the point where it's like my ego is by no means attached to anything that I'm doing. I'd be like, okay, come on, really? Are you human? We are in this human experience. But the more I've been able to disidentify from my achievements, I do it because I want to do it and I love to do it, but disassociate from those things. And even an affirmation, you know, I often give myself is, I'm going to get done what I can in the time that I have, and I'm going to let go of the rest. It doesn't have to be tied to my worth. And I think so often when it is tied to that piece, that's where we feel it, right? It's like those days where it's like, oh, I didn't get enough done as I wanted to. And why do we feel so icky? Not that you think that like things are going to fall apart, but your worth is tied to it in a lot of ways. So hopefully some of those tips helped.
That was so beautiful. And, you know, that space of creation and that space of tapping into the things that you love, it really is the difference maker. And a lot of people come to me because they want to leave corporate America. I find from having thousands of conversations, but also my own experiences, we say yes when we mean no. And we keep saying yes. And you talk about these masks. We don't even know we're saying yes. We say yes because we think that we want that, or she wanted that, or my mom said I should do that. And sometimes before you know it, we create a life that we don't want to show up for. Or we're like, how in the heck do I get out of this marriage, this whatever the responsibilities are? How can I have this conversation with my husband? I don't want to be the one that cooks every night, or I don't want to be in this corporate job, or I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And oftentimes when people come to me, they're trying so hard. Like, I just got to figure it out. And of course you need to go try some things on for size, do some education, have conversations if you don't know what it is that you want to do. But I always tell people tell me 2 or 3 things, Rachel, that you absolutely love to do. And we have to prioritize that on the schedule, because that's the place that the answers are going to come. And that's what I hear from you. Like, if we can spend more time in those things that give us energy and make us feel like our true authentic self, all the other stuff is going to get a lot easier, including solving the problems or figuring out what it is that we want to do next. That was an answer that I don't think many people give, but it was such a beautiful answer and so accurate that, like, let's stop trying to, cram all this in this time. Let's add more things in that we love to do, and let's create from that space and see what we can get done with that, from that energy.
Follow your bliss.
Yeah. Oh, I may have to borrow that one too. I'll quote you. Follow your bliss. So tell me here, when you do the lab work, so, and I see what I've started with functional medicine years ago, and it's never anything that the traditional labs, I mean, of course they'll run traditional labs, but like you said, you're optimizing within the range for you, and you're optimizing for the outcomes too. What are some things that you consistently see that, like, let's talk about women from a woman's perspective. And you're like, okay, like, what are the things that traditionally women are suffering from that they're not getting the help from with Western medicine, that you're like, okay, here we go again, right? Here's a huge mess in Western medicine.
Most people have a lot of gut imbalances. So we run microbiome tests, which is going to be a stool test. And this looks at good bacteria, probiotics, bacteria overgrowth, pathogens, leaky gut. And 9 out of 10 times I see most women and men, but a lot of women come back with dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the good and the bad bacteria. We see intestinal permeability, so that breakdown of the gut lining, which is going to create immune dysregulation, food sensitivities. It's actually the root cause for the development of autoimmune conditions, which women are a bit more prevalent for developing an autoimmune condition, just like IBS is a lot more common in women more than it is in men. So I'd say gut issues for sure. A lot of women, I see low thyroid, and then I'll see estrogen dominance too. So women who have symptoms of PMS, or maybe you're a female who's going through even menopause and you're dealing with like a lot of hot flashes. PMS, right, is like the mood stuff you get. I think we all know what PMS is. And like, okay, we know what that is. The heavy menstrual cycle. This is really a byproduct of estrogen dominance. So the body is producing or not able to remove estrogen adequately from the body. So we can produce too much because of high insulin levels, blood sugar, but we also have to be able to eliminate it. So if detoxification is off, if we're drinking a lot, alcohol, it could be deficiencies in certain micronutrients like glutathione, it could be certain B vitamins. We're not gonna detoxify very well by the liver. And then constipation, right, which is very common in women too. We actually will reabsorb estrogen back into the body. So if you're not pooping every single day, you are probably also estrogen dominant. And estrogen dominance will not only create the PMS symptoms, but it'll also lead to weight gain quite a bit for a lot of women. And then hypothyroidism.
Wow. Nobody's ever explained that.
Really?
Wow. Okay. Keep going. So sorry.
Yeah, here I go. Wow. You're like, just put some pieces together in that moment. Yeah. And then hypothyroid, or having a sluggish thyroid, which sluggish thyroid means you're not clinically at a point where you'd be given the diagnosis of having a hypothyroid, but your thyroid is not optimal on where it should be, right? And the thyroid is very sensitive, meaning the thyroid is really a secondary condition. It becomes off as a byproduct of chronic stress. Hello, type A achiever people. Becomes off because of poor diets, micronutrient deficiencies, poor gut health. So our hormones in our thyroid, like that neuroendocrine system, it's always off as a byproduct of these other things. Like your gut is off, your detoxification is off. So that's why, like, healing these things, we have to address the gut, we have to address detoxification, we have to address blood sugar and nutrition.
Where Western medicine, would they just address the thyroid if they saw the thyroid was off?
Well, they probably wouldn't address it at all if it was just a sluggish thyroid. But if you actually had hypothyroidism, your option would be probably getting on synthetic thyroid medication like T4, which synthetic thyroid medication T4 actually is not great. They've actually shown that T4 only can be root cause in SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And we really want free T3, which is going to play the biggest role on metabolic function and energy. That's the one that matters. So I'm also not against thyroid medication, right? Bioidentical. It's a type of hormone replacement therapy. I don't think we necessarily need to go that route though, if we're addressing the root cause, right? So for me, I had very, very low thyroid but that was
Mhm.
because I was competing in bodybuilding. I was at like 10% body fat, right? So it was a natural response of my body trying to protect itself, slow everything down to try to conserve as much energy as possible. We'll also see this quite a bit in a lot of chronic dieters, right? So for you
Mm.
ladies who have been trying to lose weight for most of your life and you're chronically under eating and you're doing a bunch of cardio, right? You are damaging your metabolism. You're creating something called metabolic adaptation, and your thyroid is becoming suppressed in the process, which in the long run is going to make it harder for you to lose weight. And then if you do get the diagnosis of hypothyroidism, you're like, oh, this is why I'm not losing weight. But actually was your history of chronically dieting for so long that led to your thyroid being low.
When I see a lot on your Instagram as of late, you're saying a couple things that have like totally piqued my interest. So all of that, of course, like, we need to feel good and we need to get to the root cause. And I'm such a root cause gal. You also are saying that the first thing you do at Rachel Shear Nutrition, of course, is get to the root cause. And we're all about optimizing health. But then you can focus on optimizing aesthetics. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Yeah, I love to dabble in both areas, right? We
Yeah,
need to focus on the healing, right?
sure.
So I think of healing as we're symptomatic and we're not where we want to be. And I think of optimization of like, all right, this is the fun part, you know?
Yeah.
You want to look like a Greek goddess? Cool. Me too. And I have no problem saying that. I want to feel my very, very best, right? So we can also look at reference ranges in terms of optimal, like I said, and try to get your physiology to a point where your body's going to respond the best, right? And it's not going to be just hormone replacement therapy or things like that, although for some people that may be the best option to go. A lot of it's going to revolve around modifying your nutrition, macronutrients, resistance training, focusing more on skeletal muscle mass, different supplement protocols. Like all of these things will go into more of the optimizing the aesthetics area.
Yeah, no, I love that because I think that, once when you feel good, looking good is you can focus more on that. We all want to look good, but if you don't feel good, then it's really hard to
Yeah.
even get there. Yeah.
I won't really even focus on that. Like if someone's like, "Hey, help me put on a bunch of muscle
I'm
and like
sure they
lose a
come to
bunch of
you
fat,"
because you are a specimen and they probably go like you, I would be like, Rachel, just make me look like you. And you'd probably be like, wait a second, we
and
have
I'll
some
say,
other things.
"Great, we'll get there." But right now, we're going to heal your gut and your hormones and your thyroid first, which is putting you on the path for those things. But then we're going to focus a bit more on those areas.
But what a beautiful journey to be able to have a one-stop shop with somebody who can optimize all of that. Because I mean, let's face it, what's wrong with wanting to look better and take care of ourselves and have our physique a certain way? Because that's going to relate back to confidence and our success and being, regulated in the ways that we want to be as well, and having the peace and joy and happiness. And if we don't know how to get there, some of us just don't know how to get there. We don't know how to eat. We don't know the value that hormones and other optimization could play, as we age and as our bodies are becoming depleted in areas that we just don't have any help in unless we reach out for it.
You made me think of a question that actually a girl asked me a while back. And she asked me the question of like, okay, you're so much into like healing and stuff, right? But then a lot of people look at your body and they want to look like you. She's like, do you ever struggle with that? And I said, you know what? I used to, because I used to be more of that perfectionist, right?
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between perfectionism and excellence. And
Mm.
perfectionism really is rooted in control and unworthiness. That means if I'm not at the body weight or achieving X, Y, and Z, but we can see perfectionism manifest a lot in the physical, right? Especially for a lot of women, then it leads to inadequacy and unworthiness, which is not the place that we want to operate from. That's not what I'm talking about here,
Yeah.
right? What we're talking about is excellence, which means, my worth isn't tied to it,
Mhm.
but I want to be my very best in these
Yeah.
areas. I want the emphasize already my current strengths. And that's really the big difference between the two. And I think so often, when I talk about aesthetics and body composition, it can definitely hit on a lot of those wounds for a lot of
Yeah.
women. And that's why I think it was important for me to share that piece, because there is a big difference between wanting excellence and perfectionism. And really the big difference is the root in which you're operating from in the two.
Great distinction. And thank you so much for pausing and addressing that. I could talk to you forever. I'm going to be respectful of your time, though, because I adore you. And I know this is your third one and you still have other work to do. One last question. I can't end this podcast without asking it, because we've been talking about gut health and the gut. And I have to ask you about intuition and women's intuition and gut health, and just, how do you see in this holistic full body approach, do you see that part of the health issues that some people, maybe not all, are dealing with are stemming from denying their intuition, not trusting their intuition, or not knowing how to tap into their intuition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think inauthenticity and our inability to really listen to our authentic truth, which at the core is our intuition in a lot of ways, is really lost for a lot of us. Kind of going back to what I said earlier about, a lot of these core wounds, we're putting on these masks over time and we lose touch with our intuition, which I describe intuition not so much as a thought process, right? Because as soon as the analytical mind comes in, like that's the masculine part coming in, we've already missed it, right? We're like, what should I do? Should I do this? And like decision making, like that's not your intuition by any means. It's actually a somatic, it's a bodily experience, right? And if you think about it, when there's been trauma, right, this creates a disconnect from the mind and the body. That's really what trauma is, because we are suppressing a lot of our feelings. It's like, I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to push it away, which to feel is really a intuitive type experience. So this is where part of healing too, I will say, and if you're someone who wants to really lean in more into your intuition, you have to feel everything. You have to feel the things that you don't want to feel. You have to allow for that emotion to be expressed and to leave your body, which is scary for a lot of us. But it's in that suppression that we lose our ability to really lean into our intuition, because it's the feeler and it's sensing. That is what it is.
Yeah.
The somatic experience, the body experience, is feeling and sensing, which we don't even have to think about. But with intuition, in me saying that it's really a body experience, how it shows up, at least for me, is it's paying attention to those moments where my body's contracting in a certain way. Like I pay close attention to when I feel like I can't be all of myself around somebody.
Yeah.
Now, some of that can definitely be rooted, right, in our trauma. That's why, we need to still do some of that work. But where I feel that contraction about something or someone in my life, that's my intuition saying, hey, this is not for me. And I found every time I overrode that feeling in my body, it always led to problems later on down the road. But it's also paying attention to the things that expand me, like really open me up. It's like that full body yes. And that's what I've had to really learn about myself is, usually if it's not a full body yes, it's a no for me. At least for me, it's like when I'm like, yes, yes, and I feel that expansion and that excitement for me, whether it's somewhere I'm supposed to travel to or it's somebody in my life. And not saying we always have to operate with every person in our life from that place, but it's something I know that I'm supposed to move toward. That is definitely in alignment for me. It's the full body chills, that I get when, someone's saying something and it's hitting on something that I just know. And maybe I didn't even read it or hear it anywhere, but it's just something I know through like my soul and my body. It's like that internal wisdom that I feel. And it's just like, yes, I know exactly what you're saying. I feel that. I know that integrally. And that's really what our intuition is. It's a very, very powerful tool in being able to really tune into that. And it's a beautiful experience. And I think women in particular, like they have this superpower and this gift. Like we are intuitive far more than men, right? Because the heart, right, that's the feminine. Like your heart will never steer you in the wrong direction. Like it never
Yeah.
will. People will
Yeah.
say, no, my heart's gotten me into trouble before. I'll say, was it your heart though?
Yeah.
Was it? Was it? Because I don't think it was. And your heart and your intuition will actually have you make some pretty scary moves in your life. Sometimes it's like, all right, I want you to move across country. And you're like, you want me to do what? Right. So your intuition and your heart, these heart moves don't always necessarily mean that there's not going to be fear involved. And I want everybody to hear me in that, because actually your heart will ask you to make some big, bold moves. Like your heart doesn't know any limits. It's not thinking about like all the constraints or things that are involved. It'll
It's
be,
the mind.
just like what probably happened for you, where it's like, hey, leave corporate. I want you to leave this. And you're like, you want me to do what? We're making this much money. And then the brain comes in. It's like, yeah, I want you to do this. I want you to follow, what excites you. I want you to follow your bliss. And you're like, all right. But I found, just like we said, following our bliss, following our intuition, like it's never going to point us in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful distinction. And I hope everybody heard that, because it's not a thought. Your intuition is not a thought. And by the time it gets to the thought and to the mind and you're starting to think it through, you probably missed the whole freaking thing, right? And if there's one message that I really wish that I could have given my younger self, and I love to instill in my niece and all the young women that I'm fortunate to interact with, is to trust that. And you don't have to unpack it right now. Like you may not know why you don't feel right around this man, or you feel like you need to leave this relationship, or you need to move to California. You may not know why. And I think that oftentimes, depending on who's in our life, they may not have the same capacity. So they may want the answers, right? But if I was talking to you, Rach, and I was like, hey, I need to do this, you'd be like, yes, you do. Yes, absolutely, you do. But if I were to say that to my mom, she'd be like, well, why? But why? Like, I don't understand. Like, why are you leaving corporate America? Why? Right? And there's 14 other questions. Be careful as to who you run things by as well. And you may not know the answer. You may not know 100% as we're getting to a place where we can trust our intuition. Just trust it and make note of it. And you can unpack it later and you'll figure out the reasons why later. It'd probably be helpful for you too, but don't deny that just because your mind hasn't given you the words for it.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Rachel, can you treat people outside of your state?
Yes, we can.
Okay. That's the beautiful part about being a dietitian, right?
Yes.
Functional medicine. Yeah.
Yes.
I've worked with a lot of physicians that have wanted to, that have
It's
transitioned to functional medicine, and they can't go across state lines because they have to drop the MD. And they're like, I don't want to drop it. I went to school for 8 years. I'm like, I know, but it's not like, just drop it. There's so many people to serve. So if I'm in North Carolina, I have listeners all over the place, and anybody can reach out to you and you can help them remotely as well.
Yep. Our whole practice is via telehealth. And then, we can do the lab testing remotely. So we can work with you wherever.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. My website, it's rachelshear.com. And then if you want to check out my social, it's Rachel Shear. And my practice is Rachel Shear Nutrition.
Yes. And I encourage you all, follow her on all the platforms. She's up to amazing things, and she's just an inspiration. She's just an inspiration to watch, because she's living her truth, her true authentic self. And it's so beautiful, and it's so empowering for the rest of us to step into that truth too. So thank you so much for being here, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Kristy.